Every man carries within him a darkness, not merely the darkness of ignorance or sin, but the deep, instinctive layer of the psyche that has been repressed, denied, and cast aside. This is what the ancients called the shadow, and it is composed of all that the ego refuses to admit as part of the self. Among the most potent and dangerous elements of the shadow is ungoverned sexual energy. To begin to understand the necessity of controlling sexual impulses, one must first recognize that these impulses do not exist as isolated biological phenomena. They are symbolic, psychological, and archetypal. Sexual energy, in its raw form, is a manifestation of the primal life force, a kind of psychic fuel that, when left unconscious, binds a man to base instincts and compulsive behavior. When unintegrated, this energy leaks out in the form of addiction, manipulation, jealousy, anxiety, and a continual search for external validation through conquest. But the problem is not the existence of sexual energy, it is the man's refusal to look directly at it. Society teaches men to either indulge their sexuality without limit or to repress it entirely in the name of morality. Both paths are equally damaging. Indulgence makes the man a slave to his instincts. Repression causes the shadow to fester and erupt in destructive or shameful ways. The true path, the path of power, is neither indulgence nor repression. It is integration. To integrate the shadow is to make the unconscious conscious. It requires the courage to descend into one's own darkness and confront the contents of the hidden self. For many men, this journey begins with recognizing how deeply sexual energy governs their behavior, their perception of women, their need to dominate or perform, and their addiction to pleasure as a substitute for meaning. This confrontation is brutal. The man sees himself not as he wishes to be, but as he is, driven by urges he cannot fully explain, tied to compulsions that often make a mockery of his higher ideals. But only in this confrontation does transformation become possible. Once the shadow is seen, it can be worked with. Sexual energy, instead of ruling from the shadows, can be brought into the light of consciousness and given form. It can be disciplined, not through punishment, but through understanding. A man who understands the source of his desire is no longer a slave to it, and he recognizes it as a part of himself, wild, animalistic, deeply human, and he learns to listen without obeying. The integration of sexual energy into conscious awareness transforms it. What was once a source of distraction becomes a reservoir of strength. What once created restlessness now fuels purpose. The man becomes internally ordered, not because he has extinguished desire, but because he has absorbed it into the structure of the self. He is no longer fragmented. He becomes whole. There is an unmistakable shift in the presence of a man who has done this work. His energy is not scattered or needy. He does not pursue validation or empty victories. He carries himself with calm intensity. Others sense it, the quiet authority, the contained fire, the unspoken knowing that he is not ruled by appetite. Such a man does not chase. He draws. He does not demand. He embodies. He does not react. He responds. And beneath all of this is the integration of the shadow, the silent inner work of confronting sexual chaos and forging it into conscious power. The energy that compels a man toward sexual fulfillment is not merely biological, it is psychic, kuhu. It belongs to the realm of the libido, not just the narrow sense of sexual drive, but the total life energy that animates his being. When this energy is understood only as something to be discharged, it remains primitive. When it is suppressed, it becomes neurotic. But when it is transformed, when it is sublimated, it becomes a force of creation, vision, and personal power. Sublimation is the art of transmutation. It is the inner alchemy by which desire, especially erotic desire, is lifted from its animalistic expression and reoriented toward the pursuit of higher goals. This is not denial, but redirection. In truth, the libido does not disappear. It does not dissipate into thin air. Rather, it changes form. What once drove a man toward physical union can now drive him toward mastery, toward artistic expression, intellectual insight, or spiritual awakening. The man who has not sublimated his libido remains tethered to instinct. His mind is restless not because he lacks intelligence, but because his psychic energy is constantly diverted into fantasy and gratification. He finds himself distracted, unmotivated, and drained, even when his days are filled with activity. This is because his psychic energy has no center, no aim higher than the next release. His ambitions falter, not due to lack of will, but because he has not yet learned to unify his desire with his purpose. Sublimation begins with awareness. A man must first feel the rise of erotic energy within himself without immediately moving toward satisfaction. This is difficult, for the body speaks with urgency, and the mind, if undisciplined, follows quickly. But in the moment of desire, if he pauses, if he breathes, if he observes, he will notice something else. Beneath the urge is a raw, vibrant vitality. That vitality is neutral. It is power in its purest form. It seeks expression, and sex is only one of many channels through which it can flow. By refusing the habitual outlet, by holding the energy without suppressing it, the man creates inner tension, and it is this tension that becomes fuel. Artists, mystics, inventors, and warriors of every age have known this. That great works are born not in comfort, but in the crucible of contained fire. Sublimated sexual energy sharpens the senses, deepens concentration, and gives birth to vision. It is the very force that lifts man out of mediocrity and places him into creative alignment with his own destiny. The process is not linear. Sublimation requires repetition, relapse, and refinement. It asks the man to confront his own inner contradictions, to admit how much of his ambition has been entangled with lust, how often his drive for success was merely a disguised search for validation through sexual conquest. But over time, he begins to feel something shift. His mind becomes more focused, his presence more magnetic. He begins to act from intention rather than impulse. In this state, sexual energy is not lost, it is intensified. But now it belongs to him. It no longer controls him from the shadows. It becomes a source of clarity, of vitality, of drive. He moves through the world with a quiet intensity. His work bears the imprint of depth. His words carry weight. His goals take on sacred significance because they are no longer disconnected from his primal essence. They are infused with it. Sublimation is not an escape from desire. It is the integration of desire into the total architecture of the self. It is the realization that eros and logos, passion and order, are not enemies but allies. One fuels the other. And in their union, a man steps into the fullness of his masculine energy, no longer fractured by conflict between his lower and higher nature, but aligned as one continuous expression of purpose and power. There comes a point in a man's life when external pursuits lose their meaning. The victories once sought, status, approval, pleasure, begin to reveal themselves as hollow. This is not failure, it is a necessary threshold. It marks the beginning of the inward journey, the silent turning of the soul toward what is real and lasting. This journey is not about becoming someone else, but about becoming who one truly is beneath the masks, the instincts, and the inherited expectations. This is the process of individuation, the slow and often painful unfolding of the self. Sexual energy plays a central role in this process, not as an obstacle, but as raw material. It is the base metal of the alchemist's work. It represents the chaotic, instinctual power of nature alive within the psyche, powerful, demanding, and deeply personal. Most men either suppress this energy or become consumed by it, but for the man who seeks inner transformation, this energy is not rejected nor indulged. It is refined. Individuation requires that the man confront all aspects of his inner world, the noble and the shameful, the light and the dark. It is not a path for the weak or the superficial. Sexual desire, when approached with awareness, reveals itself as more than biological hunger. It exposes unconscious beliefs, wounds, projections, and fantasies. It shows a man where he has handed over his power, where he has confused possession with love or attention with value. These revelations are uncomfortable, but necessary. They are the beginning of real self-knowledge. The alchemical tradition spoke of transforming lead into gold. This was not a literal formula, but a symbol of psychological transformation. The Libido is the unconscious, heavy, dark, unrefined. Sexual energy in its unworked form is leaden, impulsive, draining, undirected. But through the inner fire of discipline and reflection, it begins to change. The man who resists the immediate urge and holds the tension does not become cold or asexual. He becomes luminous. He begins to glow with the light of concentrated being. His instincts are no longer scattered. They are directed by purpose. This is not repression. It is creation. The energy that once ruled the man now fuels him. It is channeled upward into thought, into vision, into presence. He begins to notice a new quality in himself. Stillness without dullness, intensity without tension, desire without desperation. This is the fruit of inner alchemy, a man who is no longer fragmented. He is no longer pulled apart by opposing forces within himself. He has not eliminated desire. He has integrated it. Individuation is not achieved through self-denial, but through self-inclusion. Inclusion. Every aspect of the psyche must be acknowledged, honored, and brought into conscious alignment. Sexual energy, when understood not as an enemy but as a guide, becomes a doorway to deeper wholeness. It connects the man to his vitality, to his capacity for intimacy, to the fire of creation that burns beneath every great work of art, every act of courage, every deep transformation. But it must be respected. It must be given form. And this form is not external. It is internal architecture. The man builds himself stone by stone, not by rejecting what he feels, but by transforming it through the furnace of conscious awareness. True individuation cannot happen without this transformation. A man cannot become whole while being ruled by fragmented instinct. He cannot access higher thought, true love, or spiritual insight while chained to compulsive cycles of gratification. The integration of sexual energy is not a footnote in the process of becoming. It is central to it. It is the point at which the lower becomes the bridge to the higher. The personal becomes mythic, and the man begins to awaken to the deeper pattern guiding his life from within. Within every man reside ancient patterns of energy, psychic blueprints that have existed since the dawn of humanity. These are the masculine archetypes: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. They are not roles to be played, but aspects of the deep psyche, waiting to be awakened and embodied. Each of these archetypes carries immense power, and each requires energy, focused, disciplined, and consciously directed to fully manifest. The core of this energetic reservoir is the libido, the sexual life force. Without mastery over it, the archetypes remain dormant, distorted, or chaotic. A man ruled by unconscious sexual drives cannot access the clarity of the king. He may chase control, dominance, or recognition, but these are imitations, shadows of true sovereignty. The king archetype emerges only in the man who governs himself. His power is not loud or reactive. It is grounded. He does not need to prove his authority because his presence speaks for him. This authority is built through energetic discipline, the ability to restrain, to wait, to direct rather than discharge. The man who conserves and channels his sexual energy builds an inner throne from which the true king can rule. The warrior archetype depends on the same energetic foundation. A man without discipline becomes reactive, easily provoked, and emotionally unstable. He is driven by lust, anger, or insecurity, always looking for battle but rarely choosing it wisely. But the true warrior is forged through containment. He does not scatter his energy through indulgence or fantasy. For D, he sharpens it. He embodies precision, restraint, and intensity, qualities that arise only when a man is in command of his impulses. The sexual drive, when transmuted, becomes courage, focus, and endurance. The warrior who has mastered his desire is not dangerous because he is violent, but because he is still. The magician archetype awakens in the man who turns inward, who studies the unseen, the symbolic, the mysterious forces that shape reality. Access to this archetype requires sensitivity and detachment, qualities that cannot coexist with compulsive indulgence. The man addicted to pleasure is veiled from the subtle realms of intuition and wisdom. His mind is noisy. His perceptions are clouded. But the man who disciplines his libido frees psychic energy to rise into higher centers of awareness. He becomes receptive to insight, able to see through illusion, and capable of transformation, not just of himself, but of the world around him. And then there is the lover, the source of passion, beauty, sensuality, and connection. Most men live in this archetype, unconsciously ruled by it rather than expressing it with depth. They confuse stimulation with intimacy, conquest with communion. The mature lover arises only when a man has learned to hold desire without being possessed by it. In this state, the man feels more deeply, not less. He is more alive, not more numb. His passion is no longer random or needy, it is devotional. His touch is not grasping, but giving. He sees the divine in the beloved because he has found it within himself. All of these archetypes require initiation, not through external ritual, but through inner work. The common thread is energetic discipline. The man who cannot hold his sexual energy cannot access the higher expressions of his masculine potential. His king becomes tyrant or weakling. His warrior becomes brute or coward. His magician becomes manipulator or fool. His lover becomes addict or fantasist. When energy is contained and consciously directed, these archetypes awaken in their true form, not as masks, but as embodied forces of the deep psyche. The discipline required for this awakening is not repression. It is alignment. It is alignment. It is the daily choice to transmute rather than release, to focus rather than fragment, to become a vessel rather than a victim of one's own life force. The archetypes do not ask for perfection, only devotion. They do not require denial, only awareness. And when they are fed with refined energy, they animate the man with a presence that others feel. Before he speaks, the psyche of modern man is divided. He is torn between opposites, mind and body, desire and discipline, passion and purpose. Passion and purpose. One part of him longs to surrender to pleasure, to dissolve into the sensual rhythms of life. Another part strives for control, for order, for transcendence of the flesh. These oppositions create tension, and this tension defines much of his inner life. Nowhere is this more apparent than in his relationship to sexual energy. It is here that the split reveals itself most painfully, as guilt, as compulsion, as confusion, as the constant swing between indulgence and repression. This inner conflict is not unique to the individual. It is archetypal. It reflects the age-old division between eros and logos, the forces of connection, emotion and vitality on one side, and the forces of reason, structure and abstraction on the other. When these principles are at war within a man, he becomes fragmented. His passion lacks direction. His intellect lacks depth. His body becomes a battleground rather than a temple. He may seek escape through fantasy or achievement, but both remain hollow if the split is unresolved. The mastery of sexual energy is not merely about control. It is about unification. It is the act of bringing opposites into conscious relationship. Sexual energy, in its essence, is eros, the force of life, desire, creativity, and union. It is not limited to genital expression. It pulses in the blood, in the imagination, in the longing for beauty, in the hunger for meaning. Logos, on the other hand, gives structure to this force. It brings clarity, purpose, and alignment. When eros is left unchecked by logos, it consumes. When logos is severed from eros, it becomes sterile. But when the two are integrated, they give rise to wholeness. This integration is the essence of transcendence, not escape from the body or denial of desire, but movement beyond the conflict itself. It is the realization that the sacred is not found in the denial of the sensual, but in its conscious embrace. The body is not the enemy of the soul. It is the vessel through which the soul expresses itself. When a man learns to hold his sexual energy, to feel it without collapsing into it, he begins to transform the split. He discovers that desire, when not chased blindly, becomes light. It becomes clarity. It becomes clarity. It becomes a bridge. The energy that once pulled him into compulsive patterns now becomes a force of union, not only with others, but within himself. His inner world begins to harmonize. The old war between passion and discipline dissolves into a new form of presence. He no longer fears his desires, nor is he ruled by them. He understands their symbolic language. He knows when to act and when to hold. He learns that freedom is not the absence of boundaries, but the conscious creation of them. This is the path of inner marriage, the union of masculine and feminine, light and shadow, instinct and insight. It requires that the man see through inherited beliefs, that spirit is higher than flesh, that control is superior to feeling, that the erotic is something to be conquered. These beliefs keep him divided, and a divided man cannot know his power. True strength comes not from choosing one side over the other, but from standing at the center of the opposites and allowing both to exist in him fully. To hold sexual energy is to hold a mystery. It is to stand before the fire without flinching, to feel its heat without being burned, to recognize that it is not something to be used or feared, but something to be understood. It is through this understanding that man becomes whole. Not civilized in the shallow sense, but truly cultivated, rooted in body, open in heart, clear in mind.